Hi, I'm Will.
And I'm Luke.
And this is Will and Luke Discuss,
a vodcast
and podcast
where we discuss content related to psychology,
personal growth,
self-development,
and well-being.
This episode,
we're discussing Digital Minimalism by Newport, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. So this book is about the perils of the digital world and how online technologies, general technology overall, laptops, phones, smartphones, apps, social media, all of that is kind of just destroying our lives in a number of ways. It affects our ability to focus on tasks at any one time. It's addictive, it's exhausting, it's distracting, it can be mindless, it wastes time, it gets our priorities all wrong, and it's a distraction from all the things that are important to us and that we value. And I think what Cal Newport is trying to say in this book is his philosophy of digital minimalism, which is a philosophy of technology use, in which you focus your online time on a small number of carefully selected and optimized activities that strongly support things you value, and then happily miss out on everything else.
Nice.
So, yeah, that's kind of the opening summary. Yeah, and I guess I'm really keen to kind of get into this and talk about he's got some practical strategies that he discusses that I think we can compare and contrast about. Yeah. He's got some kind of underlying philosophical ideas about how we should be spending our time in new ways as opposed to spending them online. Yeah. And also I think a point of interest, I think for this that's going to be good is me and you have probably got quite different levels of engagement with social media in particular. And we've got different histories in terms with our use of phones and laptops and internet and all that sort of thing. So I think there'll be a good chance to compare our insights. I'm interested because I know you're not big on social media. So that'd be one thing we can certainly
we'll
compare on. Yeah.
It's still it's interesting how it's still very relevant to me nonetheless. So I don't use like Facebook or Instagram, but digital life is spread everywhere. It talks about Netflix and even things like texting and email, and that stuff can still really be addictive and sink a lot of your attention. Yeah. Oh god, YouTube cycles and rabbit holes. So I guess he starts by sort of talking about the philosophy of how this is like quite a new problem, sort of since, and that it wasn't a problem anyone really signed up for, nor was it even designed in the first place. So the two big ones he talks about, Facebook and the iPhone, like it's like all the addictive features of Facebook, the like buttons, the tagging people in photos, that sort of social slot machine type stuff, that kind of came later, because originally it was just a way to sort of look at it. It was only for college students at the time, wasn't it? And it was just a way to look at each other's profiles and who was dating who. It was kind of like a pseudo dating platform, and then it sort of evolved into this monster years later. And he talks about in a similar way, the iPhone was supposed to just be an iPod where you could make calls off it, and it was never really anticipated that you'd get sort of addicted to it and be constantly checking to it, and it would be like stuck to your hip all day, and that you'd be sunk into social media on it. And so it's interesting that first these technologies, maybe in the 2000s kind of arose, but then all the addictive components emerged out of them, and then they were capitalized on once they realized that the attention economy was how to make money. You need to push ads in front of people, and the way that you can make the most money doing that is by getting as much of their attention as possible. So then it only became like a design trait later, where you've got like retweeting, tagging, liking, all the stuff that gets people like hooked on, like I say, like these slot machines. And so I guess that's the sort of brief historical backdrop to this. And now he's saying, or Cal Newport saying in this book, we're at a point where unless you think about this critically and proactively and on your own terms, you'll just get sunk into the vortex of it, because it's so powerful. They spend billions on the psychological traps that they lock you into, and so it's something that you're really up against a massive dragon trying to fight this. And he kind of makes the argument that you can do it, but you've got to attack this from the angle of like, you are the the minority and you are like the David against the Goliath, trying to use these apps for your benefit rather than allowing them to sort of take over your life and your attention span.
And we need to start, from scratch, again, like to take it all away and then build based on our values. I think just kind of to add on to what you said about like the history of this is he's saying that now we're at this point where it's totally taken over our attention. It's totally distracting us. It's exhausting for us. And that he quotes this guy called Andrew Sullivan, who wrote this article called "I Used to Be a Human Being." I don't know if you read it, but it's written in the New York Times Magazine. And he just writes this just horrifying account, basically just about like how social media and phones and technology is just totally taken over his life. And what he's saying is that there's an online life now on top of our real life, and that's not something that we're used to having. Like it's almost like we exist outside of ourselves in this digital world, and it's affecting our ability to kind of like sit in moments, to connect with people in a genuine way, which is something I'd really love to get onto as a real standout in the book for me in a later chapter. But it affects our ability to connect, to focus, to work, and it's really dominating. Basically he's suggesting a number of strategies in this philosophy in which we can attack this. And I guess firstly he suggests kind of a digital declutter, which is basically saying that we need to take everything away that is non-optional, and then like for 30 days totally move away from it and then reintegrate them with purpose in a really meaningful way, bring them back in with like some intention, and so that we're able to like really optimize the technologies we do have as tools rather than being slaves to them. I think and he does reflect on he
recommends taking a break for 30 days because he's like, we've got into a place where we're so sort of addicted and our compulsions are so strong that we kind of need that 30 days to remember what life was like before this stuff. And only then can we really make those decisions based on our values in an easier way. I mean, for full disclosure, I haven't done that. Like, I probably didn't finish the book 30 days ago, but it's like I guess it's the difference between, say, if we go with physical minimalism and the Marie Kondo book we read, it's kind of like, well, you can just plow on with that now. Like think what you want your room to look like and get rid of anything that doesn't fit in that image, right? And he's taking the same approach, but saying we also need a gap because we need to sort of, that's the word, isn't it? Detox. Like we need to remind our bodies and our minds what life was like before we felt such compulsions to check these things all the time, or to let the Netflix cycle on, or the YouTube.
We need to and it's also, there's like a physical reaction we have to this as well. It's kind of really integrated into our bodies, and the way we people feeling like buzzes in their pockets that don't exist, or like every time we're kind of waiting for waiting at the till, or we get at a bus stop, like people are checking their phones. It's kind of, as you say, like learning to step away from that what's he called, like a reflexive compulsion to grab it and look at it all the time. It's I guess it's really shocking now. You look how you're on a train or something, like how many people are on their phones. And I think at the beginning he does reflect a bit on like we've got like we have an inability to kind of like sit by ourselves and do nothing. Like we can't do that anymore. Like it's and he quotes Louis C.K. as well at the beginning, which I thought was quite interesting. Like we can't, he's basically saying that we can't bear to be alone for a second now. It's taken over so much that we can't simply just be and connect with people. Like our phones are just tethered to our bodies. It's like an extension of ourselves.
So I guess we're talking about this in a quite a sinister and negative way. So I guess it's worth pointing out the case for why, if someone's like, well, I like this stuff, why could it be damaging? I guess one of the things that he highlights is that in the same way that like fast food can fill you up but doesn't provide you with nutrition, doesn't actually meet a lot of core nutritional needs, but it gives you the sensation that it does, in that kind of same way that when we connect without tone of voice, without eye contact, without like physical the more presence that's gone. So if we're talking about text-based communication or just like pinging buttons at each other, kind of gives us the sensation in the same way, you know, chips do, that something needs being met, and therefore you would not eat the other healthier food because you're already full, right? So you're less likely to seek out phone calls or face-to-face interactions or meet people in a coffee shop if you're kind of feeling as if you're meeting these cravings, meeting these needs in easier ways. But then it does leave you, like, to carry on the analogy, like nutritionally deprived of the actual connection you get from tone of voice, from eye contact, from all the stuff that is missed out on. So that's one argument for why, you know, it's not a good idea to get sucked into this too much as a way of communicating with people.
You've actually touched on my favorite part of the book.
Oh, yeah,
like one of my key interests. So he's the bit around, you know, what you're kind of saying to that, like we're getting used to like shallow level interactions, kind of sending someone a quick text being like, oh, hey, how's it going? And then just having like spread out conversations via text over the course of the rest of your life, as opposed to kind of like actually what he describes as, conversation centric communication. So I think I really related to this because there's sometimes I've got some friends who I kind of might touch base with every now and again, and you're texting them and it kind of feels like you're in touch and it feels like you know what's going on in each other's lives. But then if you call them like and have like a 45-minute, hour-long phone call, that actually keeps the relationship going. Like you can't, he's basically saying like we can't sustain relationships in our lives with these small, shallow level interactions, like these little like short texts. And what one strategy he does, I guess, to jump onto the strategy from that is basically that, you know, texting should be for exchanging information or arranging a time to give someone a call. Because that takes up a lot of our time, like managing all these inputs from different directions. From all these different apps, like whether it's like WhatsApp, Messenger, text, email, like we're constantly managing these, whereas actually just like a deep, meaningful phone call would probably be one, more productive, but also like would deepen the relationship with the person that you're talking to.
So just to highlight that, it makes the case that he suggests seeing connection only verbally or ideally in person with the eye contact and everything, with the touch if you can, but just choosing not to see text-based forms of communication as connection. So therefore you, as you say, you only see them as tools to communicate information or to exchange scheduling, to like when are we going to meet up for this phone call or go to this for dinner or whatever it might be.
And he's saying that there's like been a changed meaning to what it means to be a friend now. He's saying that we think it means like responding to their texts within a few hours means we're a good friend. Whereas actually a good friend is someone who like you have like a real connection with, who can like, I don't know, talk about your problems or share your inner life with, rather than just these kind of like shallow level texts. And I guess in the practical element of that, it just does keep you stuck to your phone if you're constantly managing those. I guess I was reflecting a bit how you tend to text in that way. I feel you don't seem a very conversational texter.
No. I hate it. I hate that feeling of like, you've just replied and then I don't know if I'm like hypersensitive to the anxiety of it or something, but the sort of waiting for messages to come through and then the having to like think about what you're going to say in a reply and thumb it out, and it's not, I find none of it pleasant. So maybe like I have less battle with it because I'm just like that. I don't get much of any win from it at all. So it's easy for me just to see it as information. Like I just don't engage in conversation that way. So I guess it's one of the things you point out at the start that. So I used to have Facebook for years ago. I haven't had it for a few years now. I've never used Instagram or Twitter. So I use, I'm just trying to think of like the digital stuff I use. I use email, I use WhatsApp, I text and use a phone. I have a Netflix subscription and I use YouTube, and I semi-regularly impulsively check BBC Sport. That's probably my like digital life, if I could sum it up to that. And even within that, I've reading through this book, I certainly found problems like those times where you just allow the next Netflix show to roll over, or you find yourself down a YouTube rabbit hole, or even email. I found like after I've seen a client, since reading this book, I notice I just have this I just click on the email thing compulsively, and often really unintentionally, as in the sense of I don't intend to reply to anything. So I look at it and I'm like, I'll do that later. And it's like, there was that only served me suffering by doing that. If I'm not actually going to process the email, like just don't look at it. So
that's one of his tactics. He says, I guess like in this, we can just kind of throw in some of the practices. He says, like one of them is set times in which to look at your phone and respond to messages, rather than like checking them and then responding later, because then there's constantly these like unclosed loops. So what he suggests is like pick like I guess that's what I've been trying to do, is like check at certain times of the day and then respond in bulk. So that I've picked that one up as well. So the last few days or so, I've at 4 o'clock, I've called my sort of correspondence time. So then I will sort of commit to opening my email and processing them all. I don't necessarily like, if there are some that will obviously take a long time to actually respond to, because there's a lot of information or something, it's more like a project, then I'll stick that in my second brain and sort that out later. You schedule a time.
But if it's just general quick processing, I sort of at 4 o'clock, I've gone through, processed all them, got my inbox to 0, and then opened WhatsApp, done the same with that. I turned off all the notifications on WhatsApp, and I was just checking it at 4 o'clock. Which I probably should. I realized after I'd done that, I should probably tell people who contact me through that I've done that. Because my partner yesterday was like, "Oh, I texted you about I was going to be out." I was like, I turned off all my notifications. Sorry. It's just, I found it so much more freeing just in my. Firstly, I started noticing these little compulsions. Right, like I say, that email tab's right there, and when I come up against a barrier, so I've got to write some client notes, or I'm on a project, I'm getting a bit stuck, there's just a compulsion to click something easy and distract yourself. So I'm having to like, it reminds me of when we read Atomic Habits, and we were like, you made a list of all your bad habits and sort of tried to raise your consciousness to them. I'm having that same thing again with this, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, I thought even though you might not have as you say, like as many apps or things you're engaging with online, that there'd still be something to kind of learn from it. Like, it's interesting, like why it is that we're kind of pulled towards those things. And I guess it is an individual journey, like learning about like why it is it that you check and what are you achieving. And definitely raising consciousness is obviously the first step to all of this. So that's what this book does well at the beginning. It's kind of like, here's the harms. Here's why you're doing what you're doing, because it's been designed this way. Now take your chance. Now like, you can work on this based on your values. And I think what I'm hearing in what you're saying is that you don't want to waste time constantly checking email. You value being more present in activities you're doing, and when you do things, seeing them through, or at least coming up with a plan to when you're going to finish them. That sounds like a long drawn out value that it sounds like you have. And I think if that's the value you hold, then the process that flows from that is by being like, okay, at 4 o'clock, I will reply to emails or come up with a time to handle that project. So I think that's a real good big takeaway for me as well from this. Yeah,
I've probably had about 4 or 5 maybe habits I've employed from the book. So and that's definitely one of them. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So a thing that makes this more complicated than some, let's say, addictions, is that and so not to demonize media and digital life too much, because there is undoubtedly benefits to be gained from these things, right? It's so much more convenient to send an email than having to write a letter and go to the post office and stuff. So like, compared to something like smoking, where it's like your aim would probably just be to quit, right? I want to never do any of that again. Whereas this is more complicated, because he's trying to have us sort of mine the nuggets of gold that are in this stuff, whilst not getting sucked into the sort of attention addictions that often these things either deliberately or not like pull on us. And so that it kind of brings an extra complexity in that, you know, it's no one size fits all. I certainly wouldn't say Facebook is just 100% bad, because you know, when I have used it in the past, the things that kept me there were definitely more like the groups you could have on there were really helpful, because you could stay in touch with people from like conferences and things and network in a way that, especially if people were abroad and stuff. So I definitely want to highlight that the project of this book is to try to mine the bits that you can get value from, whilst really trying to not get sucked into the negatives around it.
It sounds like you're talking about like the second principle of like digital minimalism, which is like optimization. That's what he's saying. So making sure, like, how do we get the maximum benefits out of the apps that we do have? So he's saying like less is more. Like, how can we make the most out of what we do have? So for example, like with Facebook or something, like I'm thinking like, if the thing you get the most benefit from that is groups, is kind of like, then just use it for groups and find a way of doing that. Like, don't follow anyone, or just have like an account that you check once a week on a Saturday morning at 9:00 to see what the groups you're involved with are doing. Like,
and there's lots of little tricks for this, right? Because you can even, he talked about someone in the book, they just set a bookmark tab on their browser, which took them straight to the Facebook group they cared about. So rather than having to go to the homepage and risk getting sucked into all that nonsense, they just tabbed straight to their group and then came out of it and, you know, did it on a laptop rather than a phone. So there are all these like little tricks and hacks you can do.
I think that's where I actually find this was quite like an enjoyable process. And I guess it is a process, just highlighting that, you know, kind of finding ways in which to really maximize it. And as he says, like being intentional with this, there's so much satisfaction in that. You know, being like, I'm just going to check this once a week. And then you kind of do that. And then you realize that like, maybe it's not as important as you thought it was. Like if you end up checking Facebook, this is what I've done. Like end up checking like Facebook, like once a week, just to see if there was, you know, I've been invited to like a dinner, obviously not much going on at the moment, but like invited to a dinner, or there was like, I don't know, maybe someone uploaded a photo with me or something that might be nice to kind of save, or someone's invited me, or like a friend request from, you know, someone at work or something, like, so I don't miss it. You kind of go on, you realize like, I actually don't need to be checking that daily. Like I can check this like once a week, once every 2 weeks, and I'm probably not going to miss out on a whole lot of the benefits that I actually get from it, which are the things I've just said. And it sounds like for you, like groups would be the benefits, but it's, I think he's asking you to do that with kind of like everything, and ask yourself, like, do I, also, I like this question. It says, like, if you were going to pay for these services, what would you pay for? Like, how much would you pay for it? And
he said, if you were like paying per minute, how long would you spend on Facebook? It's a really interesting question, isn't it? So he's asking you, like, tear it down and start again, I guess. And I guess the underlying main principle, which, you know, all these tricks and hacks might be different for everyone depending on their circumstances. But the principle is like, do it intentionally or deliberately or on your own terms. You know, you're not getting locked into compulsive checking and you're on, I don't know, other people's terms, on Facebook's terms. Whenever you get pinged or notified, then you're just sort of, your boundaries are wide open to get distracted, aren't they? So I guess the main takeaway is, however you do this, do it on your terms. And so that's kind of then you can use that principle to strategize all your little tricks and hacks and how you actually want to design your digital lifestyle.
Did you enjoy the section where he talks a bit about like solitude and spending time alone? Do you feel that resonated with you at all?
If not, I'll definitely
talk about it.
So it was another hidden cost of this technology is that, like, you never need to be bored. Like there's never a time, if you've always got a phone with you, there's never a time where you sort of have to spend time with your own thoughts. Like you're sat in a waiting room, you're in queue at a supermarket, you're walking to the supermarket. Like, since he talked about, you know, there were Walkmans and stuff in the 90s, but like really you didn't see like everyone walking around with earbuds in head and like faces down at a screen, right? People just, their ears are open to the world, their eyes are up to the world.
It's almost like I can't remember it. It's like, I know it was true. Yeah. I think I did. You have an interesting point there about like how now, like it's almost like we've got a soundtrack to our lives, like even to the point of like constantly listening to music.
Yeah.
Not necessarily being on an app, but it's like we're constantly listening to things. It's like there's no space to kind of come up with new ideas in your head or like have a what to say, like develop a closeness with yourself and your experience within the world. Like that's a really important thing to have, to be able to like sit with your feelings. And no wonder we're feeling as a nation more anxious and depressed because we can't handle the feelings that are coming in. Maybe that's the wrong way of wording it, but do you know what I mean? Like it can develop an inability to sit with yourself and difficult emotions if there's always a way to distract yourself. Yeah.
And it's not obvious, right? It's we wouldn't have gone around before if we were to sort of list our needs. We wouldn't have probably realized that all this time inevitably we have throughout the day, just in how he defined solitude. It was like not having input from like other people's communication. So that could be listening to music, watching a screen, like reading something, like looking at messages, anything that's like someone else has made this information is feeding it to me. So my solitude is when the only information you have is generated by your own mind. So you're only with yourself and your own thoughts, basically. And as you say, you know, that it's almost like it's a hidden need because we usually just get it and not realize. But nowadays you can get by every day without that. And he's saying that's a big cost for like mental health, depression, anxiety. They label people born after 1995 the I generation, and like those from that year, I think once you were sort of like 12 or something, I think Facebook was there. So it was kind of like these people have just grown up with it. And there's just a massive spike in sort of mental health problems for that generation, even from people a few years before, you know, it's like quite a significant and instant rise.
I do feel very
part of that.
Yeah, I do feel very grateful in a way that and I guess this will show my age, but like I'm grateful there was a period in my life where phones weren't really a thing.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of, there's something I can hold on to knowing that like, I remember how that felt to kind of just kind of go and knock on your house or like have a walkie talkie to like our next door neighbor, like one of our mates next door to me. Like, you know, we weren't kind of glued to them, you know, and even when phones did come out, they were pretty like rubbish.
Yeah,
weren't very.
We didn't necessarily.
You wouldn't check them constantly. Well, you wouldn't. Like, I remember my dad when he got a phone, like he would kind of like he would only take it if he was like going away somewhere far away. Like he wouldn't necessarily like if he was just going to walk down the shops and come back. He wouldn't take it with him.
Put it in your
pocket.
Take it.
He was like, he's like, I'm going. I know he's like driving somewhere. He's going to be there for half a day and just let us know. Like pop the kettle on when he's coming home. Or something. It wouldn't be like. You wouldn't use it in the same way. Yeah. Like I guess I'm just I suppose how this relates to solitude is like we were used to just kind of like we were fine before then. Like we were okay. Like it wasn't like we needed distracting. This thing's come along and it's like, oh, thank God we can heal our bored minds. You know? Yeah,
there were like two stages, right? There was before phones, before just people had them, and then they started coming in. But then it wasn't really until smartphones that like people were glued to them in the same way. And like you say, when we were sort of teenagers, even when we got them, we didn't really use them to contact each other. We just knock on each other's doors and wouldn't necessarily carry them around with us. Yeah. And plus it was bloody expensive. It's like 12p to send a text.
I know. Yeah. And you'd be like using all the, It's just interesting. It's interesting, the development. You just think of like kids now growing up and stuff. And I suppose I'm not trying to go too much down that avenue, but I suppose it's interesting, like the development of it. But I like one of the practical suggestions he says, and I know it's interesting, like he's saying like leave your phone at home and go out for like a walk pretty much, or just like practice having like half days, like not having it, like learn to. Because I think a lot of people feel very anxious if they're told, like, oh, don't like leave your phone at home when you go to work today or something. Yeah. So in theory, you don't need. Well, that's maybe I'm approaching that wrong. Like maybe some people do need it, or it's like comforting to have the phone in an emergency and stuff like that. But he's saying, it's something I remember telling you this on an older podcast, is that I used to work as a casual worker, and when phone calls came through, or text came through, it was always in my mind that it might be a shift. So I was like, if I miss this phone call, I miss this text, I'm going to miss a shift of work. So I guess what I did to counteract that was like make a fancy like ringtone or vibration in my pocket. So if it's going off, like it's this mad ass like vibration, I'm like, that's work. I can justify pulling myself away from what I'm doing for the sake of like earning some money. Then,
and so there are lots of hacks in that, right? So you can even now set your settings to only certain people can disturb you, or you can set it so so you could have it so your phone's on do not disturb, but apart from your work number, perhaps they could get through. So that's an option.
Or your partner, if it was something like that. I think that's something I'm kind of like experiment, like putting like who is it that I'm happy to be contacted by when I'm in the zone with something else or something. Because, often people might have kids and that sort of thing. And they like, if their kid gets sick, they want to hear from the nursery teacher or something, people have different priorities. And I guess it's like, what is worth being distracted by? And deciding that doing
that deliberately. So I am committing to that. If I'm in this space where I'm working or whatever, that I won't be distracted unless under these circumstances, and then changing your settings to fit those circumstances. You can even do it. Yeah. So if someone contacts you, like tries to call you twice in the space of 2 minutes, I think like their first call won't get through, but their second call will. So it sort of it indicates that they're keen or that it could be an emergency,
it's going down. Yeah.
Any other hacks that you've been using since the book?
So maybe I'll just have a quick look. Here's one. So scheduling low quality leisure. So this is kind of where it ties into what you were saying earlier about like he's kind of saying you can't cut it out entirely. And maybe it's good for you to give yourself like once a day or maybe once a week just to just go on all your social medias and just like check them out, mindlessly scroll, just kind of get it out of your system. And I think he says like eventually that will you'll realize that you're wasting your time. But it's kind of giving yourself, I think we've done this in a few other podcasts, talk about like give yourself kind of a bit of is it a carrot, or give yourself give yourself a bit of grace just to kind of exercise and just
exercise the chimp.
Exercise the chimp. That's it. We thought we'd talk about that book again. But it's give yourself a chance to just like flex and just be mindless and just like even kind of if you look at your work week, you're like, okay, I'm probably gonna be pretty tired after that shift. I'm gonna let myself just enjoy watching 1 hour of like mindless crap TV and just dig it. Like so, giving yourself like a bit of an excuse. To do that, what other ones he's got? So consolidating texting, leaving your phone at home, I quite liked. Another one I liked on this as well was stuff about turning your devices into like single purpose things, computers. So like in terms of like taking social media off your phone. So I don't use. I'm working on not using Instagram on my phone and only just using it on my laptop, and Facebook as well. So like when I check it, it's kind of when I'm doing my weekly review, the Tiago Forte one. So, when you're kind of going through like, I'll go through all my emails, I'll go through my calendar, I'll go through my notes, I'll go through like any outstanding tasks that need doing. I'll do my weekly check on Instagram. I'll do my weekly check. So trying to put it in more of a structured way of doing it rather than it just being like an impulsive thing. And there's obviously other hacks in terms on your phone of like, putting your phone black and white, reducing the functions, like turning off any apps you don't need, putting them on like the second screen so they're not as accessible. Turning off notifications is one that I've found is really useful. But again, I'm experimenting and toying with that because sometimes I can get stuck in the mode of like, because there's no notifications, I'm tempted to check it. But if there was notifications, I would glance at it and be like, there's no notifications, so I don't need to open up the phone to look at the
That's interesting. Yeah. So, well, that would beg the question of like, so either I'm just thinking that one through. Either there could be like specific people or interactions you're wondering if you've been notified for, in which case you could let those ones in specifically. Or
well, that's what I'm thinking. Like even hearing from my partner and stuff. Yeah. Like
I was going to say, or there's stuff that you feel can't wait. So maybe that needs sort of scheduling in, so you know you're going to check it at a certain time.
Yeah, and I think also trying to and also other things. I suppose I've just got a bit of a roll here about things I've tried and might work, might not. I'm kind of working through, like trying to message people on like one medium, not kind of having, text, WhatsApp, Messenger, I don't know, all these other different ones, like trying to talk to people through one. So you kind of like, you're checking one app at a time rather than just kind of like multiple different things, because you could easily get dragged away to different ones. Something else I found useful is like I guess I tend to check like podcasts now, like new release of podcasts every day. It's almost like a new thing I need to check. It's kind of like I'm almost scrolling on Facebook. So I'm checking what's the latest podcast out on like Luminary. I've got Luminary. I've got Spotify. And I've kind of, I suppose it ties a bit into what you're saying, like being really purposeful with your information diet. Like, what do I really want to know about? It's like, well, actually, I do want to know when these podcasts are releasing new podcasts, because when I see them, I can bookmark them and then listen to them when the time's right. Whereas if I was just kind of like looking at all Apple podcasts or something, then I'm just going to get lost in this jungle and get sucked into stuff that I'm not really interested in. So that's something, being really purposeful with the, I guess like the music I consume, the podcasts I consume, subscribing to pages on YouTube that I actually want to listen to, and giving myself like that morning check to kind of go, right, so I won't try not to answer my phone for the first 2 hours of the day. Yeah. Like try not to do anything like that, but like check my YouTube, check if there's any new podcasts, check if there's any text come through, like have a bit of like a routine. I go bam, 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 check the football gossip. And then it's kind of like, that's it for the day. Then I kind of know that's it until tomorrow. And it's almost it's more enjoyable when it's like in one go rather than kind of like drip fed throughout the day, I suppose. Yeah.
There's also this, so I think we did cover this in the chimp paradox as well, but like when it's stuff that, I don't know, if you're talking about, what did he call that? Low something leisure, like low quality leisure. It's kind of like, you do it. So there are certain websites you might check, and that if you were asked, like you'd be like, I probably, I don't want to spend my time doing this, but I know I do. It can be psychologically difficult to commit to scheduling to do that stuff, because you're almost committing to be someone who does that. But it's like you do it anyway, but just you do it like without agency. You do it because your impulses drag you. So it's almost like just admit that you do that, schedule it in, and then work with it from there. Like if I'm going to impulsively check the BBC Sport app, well, like rather than just allow my compulsions to take me there, but just give myself 10 minutes every other day to look at it or something, and do it deliberately. I think to give you more autonomy, doesn't it? More agency.
Yeah. There's something, I guess this is probably the final thing I've kind of like written down just to kind of like bring up is, basically in short, is just like make yourself like busy, like do strenuous, interesting activities that are meaningful to you. Like then you're going to have less time to do this. Like, and you've had days where it's just like, you're just back to back working, or it just doesn't stop. I know you had a week like that recently, kind of you're seeing friends on the weekend and stuff. Like he's basically saying like doing nothing is overrated. And I quite liked that. I think there's this kind of there's this tendency to think that like, I just kind of want to do nothing tonight and just chill out. That pretty much just means like chucking on TV and just flicking on your phone for most people. Yeah, like doing nothing isn't literal, right? You will end up doing something, and that something might be allowing Netflix just to roll over, or looking at your email, or exactly. Yeah, and he's saying that like we think when we're doing nothing, like the idea of doing something like strenuous and challenging isn't very appealing, because we're kind of like, we're probably laying down and we're just like super relaxed. But he's like, when you're doing it, it's fine. Those days where you're just like, you're really busy and you're just like, you're doing lots of important, meaningful things to you. Like, you're enjoying your life, you're in the moment, you're doing things that are important to you. Whereas like it's maybe just getting in the habit of being that sort of person. Like you'll handle it rather than, and maybe it's about like designing your life. So you're not kind of like the sort of person who's like absolutely busting their ass and so tired and burnt out from their work that they come home and they've got no option but just to kind of like flick through their phone or just kind of do mindless things. It's like, why are you being so mindless? Is it because you've got too much time to kill, or you're not investing your time in meaningful activities? And I'm not saying that in a critical way. It was just a really interesting observation that I quite liked, that it's like, well, in reality, if you're on your phone too much, it's probably because there aren't other things that are interesting to you at that point in time. But there's got to be something else dragging you away, something more meaningful, more purposeful, you know?
Yeah. So there are all these strategies we've like touched on that allow us to minimize, reduce, and more purposely look at our digital life such that we extract the value we want from it whilst not being caught up in the addiction of it. But then he's saying, either, as you point out, either we're doing that because we haven't got other stuff on, or at least once we do minimize and cut stuff out, we're suddenly going to find ourselves with all this time. And it's like, well,
how do you want to fill it?
That's going to be really difficult unless you have things you want to do, unless you have hobbies, unless you, so he talks about like a couple of different things. One is like physically doing and making things with your hands, like crafts, like fixing stuff. And I really, resonated with some of this because like recently in the last year of moving into this place, I done like lots of DIY, like putting up shelves and like drilling into walls and stuff. And like that sort of stuff can feel so satisfying. Like you paint a wall, you drill into it, you hang up your guitar hanger, you hang up that guitar, and it just feels really nice to have tangible things you've made and created. So he has like a whole chapter on that and how like trying to fill your find hobbies where you're actually using your hands in a skillful way, whether that's playing the guitar or whether that's fixing stuff around the house. And he also talks about like sort of scheduled social time, talks a lot about like people that do board gaming or clubs. And it's kind of like
meet up with people, join groups.
And once you fill these into your life, there'll be less cravings to be checking on the digital stuff because you'll be filled with other activities. And also that you'll recognize the difference. Like, I feel the difference between these two types of connection now. Like I can see why one, like actually socializing in a group, it outweighs, the time I would have spent on my phone.
I think something that's kind of is slightly linked to that in terms of like, how disconnected it makes us from our bodies. Like we're not able to sit with like physical sensations in our bodies and the physical connection we feel when we're talking to people. Maybe it's not a physical connection, but there's a sense we have when we're with someone doing something meaningful and deep. Like it hits us different psychologically. It means something. It makes us feel alive. Whereas technology doesn't have that for us. It's so shallow and numbing, and it's not the real thing. And I think that's what I've found worrying. When I reflect on it, and if I've slipped in my technology use, or I'm needing to reevaluate because I've kind of one too many habits have slipped. Like that's the thing I berate myself about. I'm like, you're not in the moment. You're not in your body. You're not alive. Like it almost feels it's kind of like it's draining the life out of us. And I think it sounds a bit drastic, but it's being in social groups and having meaningful activities to do where you're like, connecting your hands, you're out in nature, you're with people, doing stuff that like matters to you, like on a, and is really intentional to you there's nothing quite like it. Whereas the phone will never, ever be able to do that. Technology will never be able to do that. And on your deathbed as well, like you're going to wish you'd spent more time on your phone. It's hard. I think also kind of in this, I'm hearing myself talk that it's not helpful to kind of be like, this is really bad for you. Stop doing what you're doing, you idiot. It's more like be a bit gentler on yourself. Like this has captured you. This has taken over the world.
Yeah, it's not personal. Maybe like it's everyone.
Yeah,
right? It's,
yeah. And something you can do about it is like finding out what's important to you, doing more of it, and then being more intentional with your phone use. I suppose that'd probably be my wrap up end takeaway, like trying to find the balance between the two, like addressing the phone use, but also filling, as you said, like filling that free time you now have with meaningful things, meaningful connections.
Yeah. Well, he talked about, I felt sad reading this, that like with, generations that were around before this technology, it was about refinding those things you used to do. So, you would have used to have done more things with your hands and hung out in more social groups. So you can kind of recapture that. He's like, but for the iGen, there'll be many people, I guess from mid-20s and below who just never would have done that. Like, because they always would have grown up in a time where screens could fill your free time. So might never really learn any physical skills with hands or been in many like groups outside of school or something, which and so it's like finding that for the first time. It's like, that's huge. That's potentially really sad if that's the case for a lot of people.
I enjoyed it. It was good. It was a good book. I thought I'm glad we chose this one. I think I guess thinking about how we've done like the physical minimalism side of things, and
the philosophy is the same, right? It's about being deliberate with what you bring into your life, whether that's physical stuff, whether that's digital stuff. I guess with this, it's probably just more difficult. Getting rid of all my stuff was hard enough, but yeah. I want to cover one more thing. Just it was more personal, but it's just it's just one thing you don't think until my attention was raised to it. I didn't realize how much. But so my online banking is on my phone. Like that's the only. It doesn't have a desktop version. They don't have physical buildings. It's just an app, and all those notifications were coming through. So every time I'd spend, it would ping me, and every time I got sent money, it would, and because like, and I would be sort of reacting to that, especially, because I'm self-employed with business stuff. I want to get like any payments or receipts in my logs and in my tax return and stuff. So I'd be sort of reacting to that as and when, and I was like, sometimes I'd wake up and I'd take my phone off airplane mode and notes from the bank, notifications from the bank would be the first things I get, and I'd be sort of reacting to that. I was like, that's definitely something you can just schedule, twice a week, once a week. You don't need to like respond to this. And it's something that felt so obvious once I realized it was a habit I just picked up, and it's so seemingly trivial because it's like who's addicted to their banking app, right? but like it's such a it's probably made such quite a big difference to my day-to-day life just to schedule that and turn off all those notifications and just not look at my banking until I've given myself a little block of time to sort that out once a week. Yeah.
It's interesting the things we kind of get dragged to. It's not just kind of a like on a post or anything like that.
Yeah.
Things too. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I reckon we've given that a good crack. I really enjoyed doing that with you. I was looking forward to that one. I feel like we've done some good books that feel quite relevant to us at the moment. This is one I definitely wanted to look at the time reading. I was kind of making a lot of changes. I guess it's going to be an ongoing thing for me and us in terms of our tech use and trying to choose a more focused life in a noisy world, according to Cal Newport. So next week, we'll be covering, or next week or in the next few weeks, we'll be covering social chemistry, which I think is going to be quite interesting. I thought it'd be good to look a bit about how we develop friendships, how we maintain relationships, how we maintain our connections. Do our friends know our friends? How do we get to know people? And how's that related to our character? And how can we build more, I guess, meaningful relationships in our lives? I'm kind of a third of the way through it so far, so I'm getting the gist of it. But the author was on a podcast to listen to. And I thought it'd be a really good one for us to discuss, and maybe relating it to the digital world as well. Like how do we maintain friendships across the world and through technologies when when we're not all entirely free at the moment. So yeah, I thought it'd be a good one. So looking forward to doing that one with you next week, mate.
Nice. Yeah, I looked at the first chapter. So it's about networking, right? And how the type of networks you have really radically affect your lifestyle, and you might not even realize it. So it'd be interesting to dig into that.
All right. We'll chat to you next week then.
Cheers, mate. Good stuff.